Starting a podcast might sound simple at first, but there's a lot that goes into it if you want to make your show sustainable and keep it running for the long haul. So today, let's start to cast some light on 5 things that people never tell you when you're starting your podcast, right? And the first thing is that your podcast audience, technically known as your podience, is going to be very, very, very small. For example, according to Buzzsprout, which is my podcasting platform of choice, if your podcast got 28 downloads in the first 7 days after you publish an episode, that puts you in the top 50% of podcasts. If you're somebody who's used to a different social media platform, maybe like YouTube or TikTok or something like that, where numbers can be significantly larger, and then you start podcasting and you see numbers that are like 28, 50, and that's what your episode downloads are. And when you first start out, they're probably going to be significantly smaller than that too. Just know that that is okay. 28 downloads within 7 days puts you in the top 50%. And then even beyond that, 296 downloads in the first 7 days puts you in the top 10%. And just for frame of reference, I personally have 4 podcasts right now, which is probably too many for any single person to have. But although I'm not single, I am married. I'm a single individual. And my main podcast, which I've been doing for almost 3 years now, averages somewhere between 400 to 600 downloads in the first week. That's with almost 100 episodes and after 3 years. So those numbers might not seem particularly large, but in the world of podcasting, that puts me in the top 10% of podcasts. So the moral here is don't get hung up on numbers right away. Focus on making your show as good as you possibly can. Focus on getting those episodes out there so people can listen to them and enjoy them. And even if it's only a small number of people who are listening at first, that's a big deal, and it means that you're on the right track. And item number 2 that nobody tells you when you're starting out a podcast is don't think about monetization. Don't think about that podcast cash, because it is a long way off down the road. And if the reason you're starting a podcast is to make a bunch of money from podcasting, don't start a podcast, because that's a terrible plan that will not work unless you're the former first lady or an MMA commentator or 3 comedians who've never had a podcast before that decided to get purchased by a giant platform. But I'm not bitter. Podcasting can be a source of revenue for some people in some instances at some point in time. But when you're just starting out, that thought should really be furthest from your mind, because the money is not going to be a motivator to help you record episodes, edit episodes, publish episodes, and kind of keep pushing through to build your show and to grow an audience to the point where you might actually be able to monetize it one day. Your show needs to come from a place of passion and curiosity and fun if you want it to be sustainable and successful. Down the line, you could bring in potential ways of monetizing, but when you're just starting out, don't even think about it, completely forget about it. And to be honest, don't actually even count on it being a thing in the future. Don't think next year I'm gonna quit my job and be full-time podcaster. That could be cool, but it probably won't happen. And just because that doesn't happen doesn't mean that you're not successful at podcasting, and doesn't mean that podcasting isn't actually worth it. And item number 3 itself is not a magic number, but it's all about a magic number with podcasting, which is the number 7. Because 7, though podcasting is really fun, did you know that on average, podcasts stop after 7 episodes? Now, if you're doing a mini series or something that is supposed to be 4 episodes, 5 episodes, and you never even get to 7, that doesn't mean you have not succeeded. But if your plan is to do a continuing show that just kind of keeps going and going, on average, people make it about 7 episodes before they stop. And that makes sense, because the first few episodes are really exciting. It's new, it's different. You have all these ideas to explore. You're excited that the show's out there. By the 7th episode, that fun, that new excitement has kind of worn off a little bit. And now you're just sort of in the grind of making podcast episodes. And so if there's something that was faulty at the beginning, if your concept wasn't really clear or sustainable, if your workflow wasn't sustainable, if you just don't actually care about the topic that you're talking about, if you dove in because you just wanted to build huge numbers and get a bunch of money, it's around 7 episodes that people just sort of start getting a little tired, a little worn out. And that's usually when they'll say, we'll just do one next week. We'll do one the next week. And then the show stops happening. And that's totally normal. There's nothing wrong with stopping a show that's not working. But it's really important going into your podcast, not just to have an idea for a couple of episodes, but to have an idea and then to build a workflow around that idea that's going to be sustainable so you can keep it going for the foreseeable future. So if you have a podcast and you get to episode 8, you better celebrate because it's great. There can be no debate. Don't want to run late. Okay. And the fourth thing that people don't tell you when you start a podcast is how dedicated your listeners will be. This goes back to those smaller numbers that you're going to see. Just because the numbers are small does not mean they are not powerful. And unlike other forms of online content where if someone just happens to scroll through or see a second of what you're doing, it counts as a listen or a view or whatever, whatchamacallit, with podcasting, even though those numbers are probably going to be smaller, on average, podcasts run about 40 to 60 minutes. Some are shorter, some are longer, of course, but on average, it's about an hour of somebody's time that they're spending with you. And it's a very personal experience, as you probably know. Podcasts are often listened to just by one person and many times through earbuds. So it's just your voice directly into the person's brain. And it creates a very connected experience between the podcast listener and the podcaster. So even if you just look at, oh man, I only got 28 downloads this week, not only does that mean you're in the top 50% of podcasts, that's 28 people who spent an hour of their time listening to whatever it is that you had to say, and you probably had a profound effect on them because there's a good chance they spent then the rest of their day or maybe even some time afterwards thinking about that episode, thinking about some of the stuff that you said, talking about it with their friends. It's really pretty cool. And that's where if during your show, you give people a way to reach out to you, set up an email address for your podcast or something like that, tell them about your social media. When people reach out and tell you about your podcast, and they will if you give them the chance, you'll be really surprised at some of the things they say and how engaged your audience is with the stuff that you're making. And that's one of the things that makes podcasting really unique and really special. And you can't really capture that exact same thing really with any other kind of content or on any other social media platforms. And the fifth thing that no one tells you when you start a podcast is something that's going to affect you pretty much for the rest of your life. Even if you stop your show, this is going to stick with you for years and years, and that is a lifelong disdain and hyper-awareness of filler words. Because you will get your fill of filler words once you heard all your recordings on your podcasts and you start to notice how often you say like, so. Everybody kind of has different filler words that they come back to, and you'll really become hyper aware of those. And you might even want to go through and start cutting them out in your editing software. It will get to the point where you can even recognize a filler word just by the audio spike in your audio track. You know what an looks like, or a but. You know what a but looks like in your audio. Hopefully your audio doesn't sound like but. But anyway, it takes a lot of practice to stop using filler words in your speech. But it's definitely worth the effort, not just to make your show better and to make your editing process better, but it makes you a better speaker. And the biggest 2 tips that I can really give to get rid of filler words are awareness and practice. And when I talk about awareness, once you become aware of your filler words, you can start to notice when you're about to use one. And then instead of using the filler word, just let it be silent. A lot of us are scared to let silence exist because we're worried that people are going to tune out. We're worried that someone else is going to jump in and steal the conversation or steal attention away from us. But it's okay, instead of trying to fill every second with sound, to just finish one thought and then take a second to bring up the next thought and to just sort of collect yourself a little bit. Your listeners probably doing the same thing because they're listening to all the information that you're giving, and then they might need to digest as well. So a little bit of a pause can actually be good for the listener. The way that you can do that, either using silence or just eliminating filler words altogether, is just through practice. Not just when you're podcasting, but even when you're talking normally and you're just having a conversation with people. Become aware of your filler words and do your best to stop using them. And once you get the hang of it, which it really doesn't take very long, you'll start noticing filler words in other people, and it will actually kind of start to bother you, and it will never go away. And it's going to be a lifelong affliction. So congratulations. You're now a podcaster because you're good at dealing with your audience, you're happy with your show, and you're hyper aware of every possible problem that's happening with anybody's audio, anywhere, always. But it really is a helpful thing, and through podcasting, you can actually become a better public speaker. It does kind of become a superpower if you're able to get up in front of people, not feel super nervous and super stressed out, and effectively communicate your point and communicate a message to an audience. It's really a life-changing skill, and as someone who is terrified of doing all of this stuff at one point, I can vouch for the fact that practice really does make perfect. Not that I'm perfect, but practice really does help. Being a good podcaster, having fun with your podcast will have a lot of other benefits at other areas of your life. Maybe that's a bonus tip. That could be a bonus tip that nobody tells you, is that by podcasting, you're not just going to build those skills, but you're going to build up skills that really help you in so many different ways and in so many other different aspects of your life that you never really could have expected it when you started. And if you're still thinking about starting your podcast, I do have 2 courses that are open for enrollment for podcasters. One of them is the Podcaster Playbook. That is a step-by-step guide to the entire production process that will walk you through the production of your very first episode. And then I also have the Podcaster Ideabook, which is a guided workshop through the ideation process and coming up with a sustainable concept for a podcast that you can keep running long past 7 episodes. So I just want to let you know that those are available. I'll put links in the description if you're interested. And of course, if you got other tips or other things that people never told you when you started podcasting, I would love to hear them. So feel free to drop them in the comments, as the kids say. And speaking of things the kids say, thank you to everyone who supports my channel through Patreon and channel memberships. It means the world to me that you would go out of your way to do that. So I'm very, very appreciative of that. And if you want to know a little bit more about podcasting, I've put together this podcast playlist that's a good plosive test on this microphone. So check out some of those videos and I'll see you over there.